Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Have dinner, Betty.
Hey, Mr. Peterson, what do you say to a cold one?
See you later, Vera. I'll be at Cheers.
I'm from the future. I came here in a time machine that you invented. Now I need your help to get back to the year 1985.
It was a very trying time. In fact, it was almost like Charles Dickens had written it. It was the best of times and the worst of times. Because in the worst of times, in the sense that the bar, to my knowledge, and I've been quite active in the bar for a long time, had never really been challenged with anything real. That we were always worried about something that in the end didn't really matter much. How strongly would the Supreme Court regulate us? One little thing, are we going to be mandatory or voluntary? In the end, those things aren't vitally important. But whether or not lawyers can get insurance so that they can practice law is important to the practicing lawyer. So for once in our lives, we, the bar, were doing something that really, or had a chance to do something, that was really meaningful to the membership. All of a sudden, there was a threat that maybe that insurance might not be available. Are you going to practice law without that kind of insurance? And what we were seeing, the evidence that insurance might not be available, was the fact that anecdotally, some of our members were being refused. They were being canceled.
Oh, we knew something had to be done, and we considered various potential alternatives, none of which seemed to be likely to be successful. And it appeared to us at the time, evaluating different options, that the only option that we could guarantee that there'd be a marketplace for Wisconsin lawyers to have malpractice coverage was if the bar was to form its own Wisconsin malpractice carrier.
I was the president of the state bar. The bar was being challenged to provide a service that maybe couldn't be provided. Maybe commercial companies would not take care of us. What are you going to do about it, Mr. President? I just called together all the people that I knew, Bill Mulligan, Myron LaRoe, Joe Branch, people that I thought were knowledgeable about insurance, and we said, what are we going to do about this? We had an executive committee then, as we do now, and we looked at it, and we said, you know, the best thing we could do is form our own company. But you know, it's kind of like saying, let's blow up that bridge. You know, it was a dramatic thing to do because none of us knew anything about running an insurance company. It sounded wonderful, but anyone who has any sense at all knows that you couldn't be sure if you were going to succeed. I never knew, as one of the people involved, I never knew whether this was going to work or whether it wasn't going to work, because there were a lot of things we had to put together. And the one that was most trying, the one that worried me the most, was where are we going to get the money? You've got to have reserves. You've got to have an insurance company. You've got to have a couple $1 million worth of reserves. I have never seen a couple $1 million in one place at one time in my life.
We determined that we were going to need to raise in the neighborhood of $3 million of capital to do it. Looked at stock companies versus mutual companies and use of bond mechanisms, and we felt the bonding mechanism was the best means for us to try and raise the necessary capital within the time needed. And
the lawyers themselves responded very positively for two reasons, I think. One is lawyers are pretty smart people. We don't have a lot of morons practicing law. But they also know their own self-interest. And when I knocked on their door, or Bill Mulligan knocked on their door, or Myron LaRoe knocked on their door and said, we need X the dollars from your office so we can get get insurance for you to insure your practice. They knew they were helping themselves. So it was amazing how much they helped.
Well, it was so unique because nobody had ever explored that option before. So I can remember making calls, and they'd be like, "What are we doing?" or "What are we thinking about doing?" And the idea was, well, if we can stabilize this market, it might be beneficial to many, many providers.
They were very receptive, including lawyers in law firms, large law firms that did have malpractice insurance available to them and weren't in the crunch, but felt that this was something that lawyers in Wisconsin needed and were willing to step up and also purchase bonds at that time, even though they knew that they weren't going to be seeking to have coverage.
The very big firms were helpful. Foley and Lardner never got any benefit from this company. We couldn't insure them if we wanted to, and we don't want to. But they contributed, I don't know, $200,000. They threw a nice check into the pot. So did other firms that knew that they couldn't be involved. Many lawyers told me, many lawyers told me, "I'm never going to get this money back. Here's the check. We'll buy your bonds because we need a company, but we're not going to see this money again. Good luck."
Well, we had some bumpy time periods. Initially, we were using a insurance firm in Chicago to provide the necessary underwriting and claim services and things of that type. When we first organized, because we only got our bonds sold a few months before we had to be in business, so we needed people who could perform those functions. We subsequently decided that we needed to move the operations into Wisconsin, and we also made the decision early on that we needed professional insurance people in the company, staffing it and managing the company, and that we could not do it as attorneys as such.
So as we started bringing business in-house and quoting in-house and things of that nature, I just started to develop the database software to track all that stuff, and then eventually someone else did the actual work.
That the most significant thing that ever happened to us was Mel McCartney. And then Mel brought himself and his people with him, and all of a sudden we were a professional group.
I got a phone call in January of 1989 from Steve Smay, who was on the board, and the board, he told me the board had decided that they would staff this budding company with insurance professionals. And he said he's on the search committee to find a CEO, and he suggested that I apply. And I said, I'm hugely flattered. I don't know anything about running an insurance company. I do claims. I was at Rural Mutual Insurance Company. And I said, but I know somebody who knows a lot about insurance. He's a lawyer, he's a CPA, he lives in Madison, he's great. He'd be a great candidate. And Steve said, well, tell him about this and see if he's interested. So I talked to Mel, who was at Rural Mutual Insurance Company. He was my boss's boss's boss. And he was interested, and the board was interested. And I told Mel if they hired him, I'd really like to be the claims person.
And I thought, gosh, what a great opportunity. You know, I always look at things as great opportunities. So I thought, gee, this would be interesting to see if we got a fit here.
And when Mel saw our situation, he immediately appraised it. He said, you know, so he was just what we needed.
The outside administrators wasn't working. And so they really felt strongly about getting a professional person with insurance background, and it'd be nice to be a lawyer and all those other things. So it wound up being a perfect fit from their standpoint.
I didn't actually recognize how fledgling this company was when I came in. I thought we were having a change of guard as opposed to actually creating this thing. I quickly learned that we had a lot of infrastructure to build, and that part was very fun. I enjoyed that very much.
The key thing is I had a strong vision of what needed to be done, to make this successful, but I needed a couple good people at key positions to help that go, and one was Dennis Marks and the other was Katja.
Yeah, the worst that could happen is I have to get another job. I've had lots of jobs in my life. I figure I can always get another job.
Katja wanted to come aboard quickly. Dennis, I had to really work on him because he was, gee, I'm not sure with lawyers, and I don't know anything about lawyers.
Yes, early on I had no clue what WILMIC was all about. As a matter of fact, one of the things I said to him was, Mel, I know nothing about the law, the practice of law, and he said, we don't need to. He said, you know insurance, you know people, you know the insurance process, and you're going to do fine. He said, lawyers will look for you for your expertise in that area. They're not looking for you to help them practice law. And actually, I looked at some of the skills needed for this job at WILMIC, and everything from on the insurance side, the insurance operations side, the technical side, and I like people. And I thought this is a great combination to wrap all these together, and I can start a underwriting department from the ground up.
What the company absolutely needed in order to become a real and viable insurance company was somebody with insurance expertise. So Mel's experience at Rural Mutual was invaluable. They had to get an insurance professional. That he was also a lawyer and a CPA was extremely helpful because we all know lawyers like to talk to lawyers. So it gave him a lot more street cred to come in to the board and then to our insureds and to our potential insureds and say, I'm an insurance professional, but I'm also a lawyer. I will credit Mel with making WILMIC the successful company that it is. If we picked any one person, I think he's the guy.
Again, we had great people, both Dennis and Katja.
And I could see that these people all had experience. They all knew what it was like to work for an insurance company. And to a man and woman, they all knew a heck of a lot more than I did. So I said, all of a sudden, we have the makings of a team here.
I had quite a bit of experience in the insurance industry and working at rural and various departments. That helped me a lot. Mel, of course, was very instrumental. He managed the operations area at rural. But I shouldn't say, but also with that, the help that I received from the other NABRICO, the National Association of Buyer-Related Insurance Companies around the country, the atmosphere there and the attitude still to this day, for the most part, is very welcoming and open and sharing. They enabled me to do a lot.
Their company's older than WILMIC, so I spent 4 days in North Carolina observing their claims department, sat through claims committee meeting, which involved many members of their board of directors, which was interesting. Looked at their procedure manual, got a copy of their manual. I went to Minnesota Lawyers Mutual and spent 3 days there. Same thing, talking to the adjuster, looking at the procedure manual, seeing reserving philosophies, from how do you write these letters, how do you pick the defense counsel you want on your panel. And then I came back and wrote a procedure manual. It was exciting. Boy, every time the phone rang or the mail came in, I was like, wow, what am I going to learn now? And I was pretty busy with the claims part. I really didn't worry so much about, is this company going to make it or not? The company should make it. It should. The idea, as I said, it's a great idea, and it was working in other states. If anybody else can do it, there's no reason we can't do it.
I think we had two offices. One was a storage room, and one turned out to be my office. And then there was another office. So actually there were two offices, a storage room, and then open area. So we were going to put, 5, 6, 7 people in there. So Dennis was the first in, and we didn't have an office for him. So he was a big fan, as I was, of WKRP in Cincinnati. So we got the duct tape out and created an office for him, including a doorway in this open area.
We moved into Olin Avenue, and that location was not prepared and never would be prepared for the extra people. Mel, of course, Katya, and myself, and I knew we were going to need a customer service rep. And I wound up clearing out a closet, and I used that for a week or so. And then eventually I shared some space with our IT guy, and I put some tape on the floor, and I became Les Nessman. We moved into the former Ground Round building. This was a hamburger joint, and that's a place where people would take peanut shells and throw them on the floor when they were eating. We didn't find any peanut shells, by the way. It was all really, in fairness to the owners. They renovated it. It was a very nice spot.
Oh yeah, we had enough room and had enough space that we needed. The price was right.
Well, my fellow Americans, this is our time. Let us embrace it.
You saved the day again, Woody.
You're my favorite deputy. You got a friend in me.
The biggest challenges that WILMIC faced were getting enough of the market share in Wisconsin to make this work. Because we were created because either malpractice insurance wasn't available, especially to solo and small firm lawyers, or it was priced out of their reach. So once we came in and the actuaries helped us pick a price based on no data, but what was happening nationally and guessing how that would go in Wisconsin, what happened is very quickly our price became the ceiling. And the other carriers that were around at the time, as their price quickly started to come down. And we have pretty much always been the most expensive. So that was our biggest challenge.
We can't meet Standard Oil on the price of gas or oil. We can only do what WILMIC can do. We can't match them. If they want to price us out of the market, they could do it. It's not in their interest maybe to do it, but they could do it. So we can't fight them that way. We can't cut our rates down so that we're cheaper than they are. I don't think we've ever been cheaper than most of our competition. But we have we have ended up with a very loyal client base.
And I think of lawyers now who are still with us, and I look back fondly, and I recall conversations with them back then, and explaining that those cutthroat commercial carriers are not going to stay around, which we're basically vindicated. There are a number who've come back in the market, some have left again, and so on. But there's a laundry list of companies who were beating us up back then who are gone. Actually, by 92, 93, we could sort of see the light at the end of the tunnel. At least we were hoping it was a light, and not that proverbial freight train coming at us. But 90, 91 is where, if there's any doubt, there were there's a little bit there, but not. As we approached 93, 94, we started to see, and those were good years, as you know, from the economy was doing great, the stock market was doing great, our underwriting results were starting to look really good, and we were feeling as though maintaining our rates and sticking with those established underwriting guidelines we put together when I came were starting to bear fruit, and that was very, very gratifying.
I would say probably 93, somewhere in there. I could see that we had started to turn it around from a underwriting standpoint and getting that profitable. And of course, we had to work with our investment advisors to maintain investment income, because that ultimately was what was going to pay back the bonds. We had to build up our surplus. We had to have positive net income every year, which we did. And then the gravy, so to speak, was the investment income, which we knew that we could then, as long as everything else is going, we could start paying back bonds. And that fit into that 5-year plan that I drew up.
We are moving in the right direction. This is happening, what we were anticipating would happen, and Mel indicated would happen. That was a milestone. But then when we got to the point where we could, first of all, pay off the interest on these bonds that were sold in '86, that interest had been accruing and showing as a liability on our balance sheet. And when we were to the point where we could pay off those that interest, that was a big milestone. Then secondly, when we were to the point where we could seriously think about redeeming the bonds, that was just incredible. It's like, yes, we are, it's happening. We're getting there.
A lot of people thought that they were just giving us this money. And when we were able to say, well, here's your check back for those bonds you bought, all of a sudden we had prestige that we hadn't had before, that we were going to give them that money back. It was just temporary capital, and what a wonderful thing, and because it was unexpected.
And then another milestone, of course, was when we started to pay dividends. And that's when our policyholders really, really saw that we knew what we were doing. Our reinsurers believed in what we were doing.
We got to a point where we could comfortably feel we could pay X dollars or percentage of dividends every year. And once you start that momentum and people see that, oh, well, and then selling the renewal on the basis, well, your premium's really only, as you notice the last couple of years, we can't guarantee going forward, but it's really about 90% of what you paid because you're getting a dividend and so on and so forth. So it all kind of blends in, but it takes time and perseverance, tenacity to hold in there to your principles and keep it going. And enough people understood all that and stayed.
I just heard a loud boom. You did? Was it a plane?
Did you ever make anything happen? Anything you couldn't explain? You're a wizard, Harry.
Studying law. Making a responsible choice for my future. On a Friday night, being a lawyer had better be awesome.
Long term, my goal had always been to retire at 65. So that's when I took the position, I was 50. So I figured, well, it'll take 10 to 15 years to get this thing squared away, but I do want to move on at 65. And it worked out.
I also did want to become the next CEO, and so my goal was to learn from Mel, and he's a great teacher, and he and I talked periodically, and he told me that he thought it would take him about 2 years to train his successor, and we started meeting 2 or 3 times a week for a couple of years. That first 2 years, I spent just a ton of time because I wanted very badly to do this well. And, for me, that means a lot of time preparing. I like the challenge. I like the opportunity. I think what we do matters a great deal, which is important to me. I would like to leave the world a better place than it was when I got here. I think this job allows me to do that. Well, originally, the company was in the basement of the bar center, and now we're in this totally lovely building on Heartland Trail.
I see another 100 or more years. I have that confidence because I think the company is based on important principles of providing the best possible service to our insureds and to treat them well in the underwriting process, if they have claims and those things, and making the effort of contacting them and providing them with information on how they can avoid claims, and making the point of knowing our insureds, I think is the reason that the company will remain a very important, permanent source of insurance coverage for Wisconsin lawyers.
I think that we are going to look back 25 years from now and say, oh, remember back in those days when we had to do data entry, where the technology is going to just enable us to be much more efficient. And yet, Tom, I think 25 years from now, we're going to look back and we're going to say, you know, we know the George Affeld firm. We know the XYZ firm down the road. We know those people, and this is what they do, and this is what they told us 25 years ago. This is what they told us last week, and so that won't change.
We felt, you know, we were on the ground floor of getting this started. There's a certain amount of loyalty. WILMIC's always been responsive to any questions we have. They're proactive. They're also reactive if you need things. So we've had good service from them, and I don't think we've ever seriously looked at even getting quotes from anywhere else.
The internet has just caused a fundamental shift in the way lawyers practice law. I think geographical limitations will eventually go away. It is as easy to certainly obtain a client in California as it is to obtain one from down the street working through the internet. And in terms of the services that you can provide for that client, it is becoming more and more easy to do that regardless of where you're located geographically. Limiting our policyholder base to lawyers who practice in a geographical area, I don't think we'll be able to do that forever. I don't know when the time will come that we can't. I think we still can. And right now, of course, licensing is still limited by geographical areas, so that is helpful to us in terms of our business model, but I think that will inevitably change as well.
I can't imagine it disappearing. It's a matter of continuing to serve the people you serve and do it well.
Our intent is still the same. We need to protect the professional liability of the lawyers that we insure. The tools we use to further that intent change all the time.
It was all great fun. It was like, oh, God, what a problem this is. God, how the hell do we get out of this one? But it was all stuff I had some background and knew where to go to get help and so forth. And to me, that's just, I couldn't ask for more. Yeah, it's what the original founders wanted. And to me, that's my satisfaction is the Bill Mulligans and Don Haney's, they got what they wanted. And I felt proud that I contributed to that.
I'd do it all over again in a heartbeat.
All those things that we did would be for naught if it wasn't for them, and we always keep them in the forefront of our thoughts whenever we do anything. It's what's in the best interest of those policyholders.
When I look back, the thing that strikes me now is the strongest asset we had, by far the strongest asset we had, was trust. They trusted us. They knew that we were them, that we really wanted to make a company, so that reservoir of trust was the most powerful asset that we had, and I think that asset exists to this day.
I hope you had the time of your life. So take the photographs and still frames in your mind, hanging on a shelf in good health and good time. Tattoos and memories and dead skin on trial. For what it's worth, it was worth all the while. It's something unpredictable, but in the end is right. I hope you had the time of your life. something unpredictable, but in the end it's right. I hope you had the time of your life. It's something unpredictable, but in the end is right. I hope you had the time of your life.